Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Monday night in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, here's the pattern we've been in for much of the month of October. It's favored more ridging over the western part of the United States. In fact, remember, for much of last week, we were discussing about this high over low Rex block that is starting to dislodge and starting to move, but you can still see today the effect of that flow. The other part of this is a lot of convergent flow in the mid-levels of the atmosphere right here, sitting over parts of the plains in the Midwest, and then a deep trough that's anchored itself at times between the Great Lakes, Ontario, Quebec, and the Hudson Bay. So this pattern was blocked and it was hard to get out of the way, but we do have some things shifting around right now that we need to talk about that are really going to change this pattern up quite a bit here in the near term. Now, as a result of this pattern, this is what the month-to-date temperature ranks looks like. And across much of the eastern half of the United States, we've been quite cold. In fact, packed around the Appalachian Mountains here, some of these locations are having a top 10 coldest start to October on record, and there's quite a bit more cold air coming in the next few days to this region. Now, parts of Virginia, North and South Carolina needed more time to get some of the crop to finish before harvest, and this was not a great way to finish a season without the heat that was needed. But across the West, most of Oregon was having a warmest or top 3 warmest such start to October on record. There's still more heat coming this week, and then same thing for parts of Washington. So just a real split across the United States because of that blocked up pattern. Now, I want to dig right into why and what's changing, all right? Now, you know how much I go on and on about these maps. I think that they're critical, and I'm going to tell you why again. When we watch the transport of energy, really the transport of momentum out of the tropics, the transfer of heat out of the tropics, that's the total transfer of energy, if you want to think of it that way. It's always going to come down to an interplay between the trade wind behavior and the jet stream level wind behavior. So I'm focusing on the trade wind. Now, what we see is that in the near term, for the next 15 days, so from today going forward all the way to the very beginning of November, we see that the blue-greens represent the strong trades and the reds represent those westerly wind bursts. Now, when I look at this, what I see is that the westerly wind burst extent comes out here as far as phase 4, 5, maybe even pushing into phase 6. But you can almost notice that the trade winds are coming in waves, and they're backing up a bit. So what that means is we might start to see more of this MJO phase 6, at times bordering on phase 7. I don't anticipate, because of La Niña, for this to break out into phase 8 or 1, or even do a reset back to the Indian Ocean. It's probably going to hang out in this vicinity for a while. Okay, we've seen that because the MJO, which about a month ago was stuck here in null space, pop out briefly into phase 5, but it's been spending a lot of time in phase 6 and trying to get over and kind of straddle the border between phase 6 and phase 7. That means, well, all that means is the best rising motion is somewhere in here. And that affects the way, if you just look at the map down at the bottom, that the exhaust at the top level of these storms kind of comes out and impacts the Pacific jet. Now, I've looked at it in terms of the extension of the Pacific jet, the poleward movement, the tropical movement, or the retraction of it. But in reality, this is all related to the trough ridge pattern in the Pacific jet and the polar jet with trade winds. And what you can see is that if it's MJO phase 6 in the month of October, we just tend to put more ridges here. And we saw that a lot. And we could make an argument that the MJO's been pushing for a phase 6 type pattern for a while now. You get deeper troughs that are sometimes sitting in this area. We're certainly in that configuration right now. In fact, I was just watching it today on satellite. This was just as the sun was getting ready to set here on the eastern side of the country. Some scattered convection still wrapping its way around this deeper low. And remember, the front that's still draped here over the weekend brought heavier rains all the way from Arizona to Mexico, aided on by a deeper cutoff low that sat here. And then some storms into parts of Oklahoma and in Arkansas, including, if I go back here, there was a tornado near Phoenix that's really caught the attention of a lot of my fellow meteorologists. But the reality of it is it's all dominated by this deep trough. And we actually have snow flying around this today. Some of it was even trying to get its way all the way into parts of Illinois. In fact, I'm quite interested in this. If you don't mind, I'm going to go take a quick look. If we zoom in right here on the tip of Lake Michigan, we can actually see once this loads. Yeah, look at this shore parallel lake effect snowband coming in right through here. That in the middle of winter would be dumping lots of snow. I imagine we're getting a mix out of this right now, though, given the temperature profile in this area. But that's the depth of this trough. Now, out west, gosh, I almost skipped over it here. If you just go back out west today, I mean, we can just zoom in here And even though we have this large coastal low that's in place here, we've watched for throughout most of the day today more smoke from the wildfires. And our midday model runs were suggesting a lot of that smoke is going to continue to advect or move north until this pattern changes. Now, this morning I was talking to some folks in the Pacific Northwest. My concern is when the pattern breaks that we could get some very strong winds out ahead of these fires in the Cascades and then pockets here throughout the Northwest that could get suddenly blown. The winds could really turn around quickly and blow out of the Northwest, spreading the fires in a different direction. But that's not until Friday or Saturday of this week. So just something to think about as I go through the rest of this. One of the reasons why we've seen so much fire action here is that so far from the beginning of October through the 16th, right up here along the coast, it's the driest such time period on record, and throughout much of the Pacific Northwest, from California and Nevada through parts of Oregon into Idaho, and then here eventually into Washington. It's been just extremely dry. Now, we know that on the other side of the mountains, in the plains in the Midwest, we've been dealing with very dry conditions as well. And some of the soil moisture data combined with the recent precipitation just shows the gap right in through here where there have been very infrequent rainfall events. When they do come through, they're typically followed by very strong winds causing high evaporation. And so even through this corridor here, or right in through this area here, even though we're technically above average on this 30-day window, it's still very dry in those regions. This is what the latest soil moisture data looks like. And from the weekend system that came through here, delivering some of that hail in a part to Arkansas, the moisture come up a bit, but most of the Mississippi watershed is still very, very dry. In addition to that, I'm thinking a lot about the central United States wheat crop that's being planted here, and I just continue to see such dry conditions and very low soil moisture. And when the storms do manifest themselves, they're not giving widespread coverage. So we need to know if this is all going to change, because we know that as of late, there's been major problems on the Mississippi River. This was sent to me by Jeff Tarsi. He's the president of global retail for Nutrien Ag Solutions, and he lives near Memphis. And he was just showing me look how far off the shore the water is. And if you notice this barge here, is empty, so it could be just on a return run, but still, imagine we cannot load them down much given how low the water level is. Now, I'm going to link this in the description, but if you'd like to go check out any river level that the USGS monitors, they put it on this NOAA site called water.weather.gov, and all I did was I clicked on the river observation tab. Now, you can zoom in a lot of different ways, but I'm going to zoom in down here. Let's get down to the Mississippi River. And just take note that the color coding over here denotes where the gauges are. So you can kind of see those that are really below their water levels. So I don't know, we can just pick this one right in through here. Whoa, zoomed in a little fast there, sorry. And this one right here at Osceola, is that how you say that? I'll have to go look that up. I clicked on it. Let's bring it back here again. There we are. You can see that with the low stage at 0 feet, we're at 10.5 feet below that right now. And it's also just as low near Memphis and other points farther downstream. So will we be bringing enough moisture to really revive this? Unfortunately, you want the moisture to return slowly, which means we're going to continue to see the problems with the barge traffic issues. Because if you bring in all the moisture at once, then you go from flash drought and low river levels to flash flooding and rapidly changing river levels, which is what we don't want. So how much longer is the dry air going to be around? I'll take a look. This is the 12Z run from the European, looking at total accumulated precipitation. We don't see a pattern change until Friday and Saturday, and there it is. So there are several more days from the MidSouth throughout the entirety of the plains, the Midwest, and down to the Southeast that are going to be very dry. It is normal for California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona for this area to be dry, but this whole pocket in the midsection of the country continues to stay dry. But the pattern shift is here this weekend. See it coming into the Pacific Northwest? And as that plows through the midsection of the country, we've got a pretty interesting setup on the weather pattern coming through. I can't wait to kind of show you and describe, because there's 2 separate waves. In fact, there are 3 separate waves coming through in the next 10 days, but they're all this weekend and beyond. So we'll come back to that in just a few moments. The near-term story, though, has been a lot around the depth of the cold air. And you can see here that we've got freeze warnings from Colorado all the way to Pennsylvania. We have freeze watches that extend down to the Gulf Coast. And interestingly enough, the air is very dry in here, and that's why you can still see this shade of color representing red flag warning. Strong winds are prompting the risk of fires. We still have winter storm warning that's up in place here in parts of northern Wisconsin into the UP. On the other side of the lake here, very windy. We've also seen the issuance of winter storm advisories coming off of, winter weather advisories coming off the tip of Lake Michigan. But in the Northwest, this is all air quality alerts in that particular area. So what I'm watching carefully with today's midday runs is right here. Remember us talking a few moments ago about that wind parallel, shore parallel. I guess it's a shore parallel band right here. It appears that the model this evening wants to mix in some snow there. And as we see this moving through this part, I'm just looking here at Indiana. Yeah, we have more snow farther to the north, but as we see this moving through Indiana, that's kind of the first real lake effect snow band I've seen through 5 a.m. tomorrow on Tuesday. And that upper level low just continues to sit and spin. So don't be surprised if throughout the day on Tuesday, not only there's snow here, but farther south in Indiana and Ohio, curling over to parts of Pennsylvania. As this cold air stays tucked here, we could get even some convective snow bursts coming out of this by Tuesday afternoon and evening. So this system is very potent. That's leaving the Great Lakes area, spinning its way off into parts of Ontario. The National Weather Service did put this out. This is for this part of Indiana. Probability of getting a couple of inches of snow here is up about 40%, so we have to be on the lookout for that. And they say when it does snow, 1 to 2 inch per hour is possible, but it's going to be a very hard forecast, and you can see their confidence levels are all low given the temperature profile and the temperature of the ground. So I just wanted to point that out. But since we're talking about snow, by the way, it's also important just to say this is our total seasonal accumulation so far since the 30th of September. And this past weekend brought the first snows here into parts of northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the UP and Michigan. So just want to give you a quick look at that. Okay, let's get back to that cold air. This map shows the next 7 days where there's the probability of a frost or freeze event, and it extends quite far to the south and quite far to the east, including pockets of the Carolinas and Georgia and Virginia, this whole region in through here, which would still be a few weeks early on the first frost. I was looking this morning in Raleigh, typical first frost date is around the second week of November, so this would be a very early event. So let's go have a look at when these colder temperatures are going to be there. And the first round of it comes tomorrow morning on Tuesday morning. And you can see that parts of the western Corn Belt, we may have temperatures here. This is Mitchell, South Dakota, 9 degrees Fahrenheit in the morning. Parts of northwestern Iowa in the teens, really cold morning showing up here. And then by Wednesday morning, it seems as though that will be the farthest extent of the coldest air to the south. And then by Thursday, it still could be lingering over here in parts of the MidSouth, getting into the southeast, and then pockets here of the mid-Atlantic. So this is the extent of the cold air that's coming through. But you'll see that toward the end of this forecast video, there's quite a bit of moderation that occurs into the weekend. And I want to show you that in high temperatures. Take a look at this. Here's Monday's highs. We already saw these. That's tomorrow on Tuesday. Some of these temperatures feel like winter for some folks here. There's Wednesday. Watch the moderation. So the heat leaves the northwest, comes right back into the central plains, running all up through the Canadian prairie. And there it is. By Friday into Saturday and Sunday, that's when the pattern flip is taking its shape. Now here's where it's coming from. Today, right now, this is the feature we're watching. To get you oriented, this is China. This is Japan. There's the Korean Peninsula. It's this right here, this wave, that's going to be plowing its way through the North Pacific, through the Bering Sea, and help dive through the Gulf of Alaska into the northwest. And as we look at it, we know that the MJO is going to be in phase 6. And since this is occurring near the beginning of November, the MJO phase 6 in November favors troughs here and favors troughs there, and ridges at times that like to build into the Mid-South. Now remember, the whole pattern progresses, but this is just the favored source regions of these troughs. So this is really lining up well with that teleconnection over the strong trades with the MJO. So here we go. Watching the 500 millibar height pattern through Wednesday and Thursday, still there. This is the guy we're watching. This is now through the day on Thursday, getting into Friday, and let's stop it here midnight on Saturday morning. That's when the first of the really deep pockets of this trough come in. What's interesting is the trough that left the Great Lakes area and went to the northeast behind, it left this. And there's an upper level low that might be sitting and spinning over parts of Florida. I'll show you that in a few seconds. But that trough dives in here, and then by the weekend starts to pull out into the plains. Now what's interesting is behind it, there's actually a second wave here, and the lead wave is there. And it's got a bit of a negative tilt on it. See how it's tilting backwards rather than forwards? That means this won't dive into the United States. It'll lift out. So the flow will come around it like this. So any system that forms on the lee side of the Rockies, and no, we cannot yet speculate on where it's going to be. It'll be somewhere here. We'll rise. We'll move northeast, not dive south first. And what'll be interesting about that is there's the possibility of a couple of short waves to the south that could get pulled into this. I'll show you more about that in a second. But the longer we go out there to this last week of October, the models just want to keep putting those troughs of low pressure coming out of Alaska, setting up in the west coast of the United States. And the result of having that kind of pattern in place really changes the activity across the country. So we're going to talk about it, and we're going to look first at the dry air. This is a dew point temperature forecast. So remember, the dew point temperature is talking about moisture. Really dry air in place. I mean, you're just going to see this dry air plow through the eastern half of the country, through the middle of this week, all the way out there to Thursday and Friday. Now, what a lot of us are going to be watching is Friday, remember, is when the next wave is coming in. That's going to set things up for much more activity here in the midsection of the country. So as we watch Friday into Saturday, the number one thing on my mind, if you're east of the Rocky Mountains, is moisture recovery. So by Saturday afternoon, getting into Sunday afternoon and evening, this is when this first system pulls here into the north. And it's grabbing dew point temperatures up in the upper 50s, low 60s, and really dragging them pretty far to the north as well. So that's juicy, open Gulf transport. My concern is at the same time, we're going to be seeing a relatively strong low-level jet that'll set up right in through here, and then a very strong front that comes plowing through it. So what we're talking about here is more about the ingredients for a severe weather outbreak. Now, to see all that take shape, I got to show you the operational model runs. Now, we've already played through Tuesday into Wednesday and Thursday. So that's it. That's the main feature. The front dives out. And then just to finish the week, Thursday into Friday, there's not a whole lot going on until Friday night. That's the first wave that comes through. And that wave dives down, and currently the model's attempting to develop a low somewhere here in the western Dakotas. But remember, it's going to lift quickly into this direction. So this is Sunday morning, Sunday afternoon, and evening. Now what's interesting about the European model is it has really put a front right in through here, a strong one. And we just saw that it's going to be drawn in lots of moisture, but the model didn't kick out any precipitation. That does not mean it won't be there. There's the chance on Sunday night, at least based on the latest timing, that we could be seeing some severe weather here. There it maybe shows up. But I think this is going to build farther down the line here. And this is now getting into Monday morning, afternoon, and evening. And then we can play out here until the next wave comes in. See it? And that wave comes in here on Tuesday into Wednesday of next week. So next week, after this system rolls in, we're going to see multiple chances of strong fronts plowing their way through deep moisture with strongly forcing air to rise into high wind shear environments. And what I will just say is I think this whole corridor in through here needs to be on the lookout for strong to severe storms. And I especially think that this corridor in through here needs to be aware of it. Now, it's pretty far out there, but that's the number one thing I want to be watching. What do we see? There's the chance for snow to the north. I'm not yet ready to comment on where I think the snow is going to be. It's too much bouncing around to even tell you with any sort of concrete truth where it's going to be. But I can say the Cascades, the Sierra Nevada, the Blue Mountains, getting into the Rocky Mountains here, we could see some really big snowfall amounts piling up as the pattern starts to shift around. Now, the GFS is way more aggressive. Ready? Here it is. Let's get to Friday. There's Friday. Now watch this. Notice how the GFS on, this is Monday morning, Monday afternoon, and evening. So see how it's got the timing different? Monday morning, afternoon, and evening. It is trying to link together a deep low here with two short waves that are to the south and produce this large area under which we could see a lot of severe weather. Now this is next Monday night. See how the timing's a little bit different, but then it drags it right through the heartland of the country off east, and then there's the second system behind it over here. Now the GFS is known for going to high amplitude, but I want to show you what the models are struggling with here. Can I take you all the way quickly to Friday? There we go. So this is Friday. There's the wave we're watching. This is the vorticity maps. And as we go from Friday through Sunday, here's the first big wave that exits Sunday. So all you need to remember is find the wave, bisect it, and know that right here is the divergent quadrant. So that's where the low is going to be racing out of. But there's a second shortwave here and a third one there. And can you see how they're pretty far a distance from the main wave? So what the European model is doing is it's trying to bring those two waves out Monday night. And that's what's got me worried in this area on Monday night, given the high wind shear, the moisture that's available, the fact that this system lifted to the north, and also these two individual waves helping to initiate storms that could be very problematic next week. Now, that wave right there coming through on Tuesday could be the third round of all of this. What does the GFS say? Okay, here's the lead wave on Saturday. It's faster, moves through Sunday into Monday, but it attempts to grab both of those two short waves that the European left off and pull them right in much quicker. So that's why it gives that big band of severe weather that rolls all the way from Texas all the way up to Illinois and just brings it on through. So it's an entirely different look for week 2. Now, we're not yet there. We still have the first week to talk about. So if we do a quick comparison of the models, the greens here represent where the European is wetter, and these colors represent where the GFS is wetter. By the way, I didn't mean to leave this out, but come back here with me. Before this all gets going, remember that we're watching this potential cutoff low here that in this morning's model runs came much closer to the Carolinas, delivering a lot of rainfall. To this afternoon's runs, they've stayed offshore. So I just want folks in this area to be aware that next weekend we could get some pretty heavy rainfall out of this. All right, back to this. Whoops, sorry. This is still before these two big events. This is just capturing the first wave next Sunday into Monday. We still have a lot to go after this. And that's going to be following these deep troughs over the west, which is why the week 2 forecast still remains wet in this area. Now, the pattern is shifting, and it looks as though it's going to stay this way through the first week of November. So harvest windows after the next 6-7 days are going to tighten up in a big way here. We're going to see better chances for some heavier rains. Could get some of those rains back over where we need them in Kansas, but unfortunately I don't like the chances for some severe weather with this. From there, let's talk about the temperatures in the longer term. Because with that pattern flip, the heat leaves the west, builds into the central United States. See it there? That's what the last week of October looks like. And it continues to the beginning of November. Now, the new long-range data that was just released today for November is very La Niña-like. Can you see this? This whole region in through here showing up drier, that's very characteristic of November La Niñas. Why big, large ridges in the upper level sitting in this area? Why is it so much wetter in the west? Well, we're now predicting more MJO phase 6, more troughs in the Gulf of Alaska, and they tend to eject just like this. This does not mean we will not see precipitation here, not at all. This is just a reflection of the overall pattern we're going to be seeing in November, favoring MJO phase 6 more than likely, and this strengthening La Niña. Now, speaking of that La Niña, here's the latest sea surface temperature map, which remember the sea surface temperatures are the symptom, the trade winds are the cause, and they're still quite strong. Now, as I stated, if it's November, everywhere that you see the warmer colors, that's where we tend to see a drier signal. The bluer colors represent wetter, so you can see drier in through these corridors, more active in the midsection of the country and very active in the Pacific Northwest. So the longer-term forecast that was just released by the European is following La Niña to the T. But we have some new data to share with you about the even longer-term forecast. And looking at the latest update from the CFSV2, there's still solid evidence that to start the new year, we're going to lose the strong grip of La Niña and start to move back to INSO-neutral conditions, with even the possibility of talking about next summer having El Nino around at that point. What I want to show you is the new global data released by the IRI Multi-Model Forecast Group out of Columbia University. And this is their fall forecast into early winter, November, December, January. A couple things to point out. They still have South America split wet north, dry south, which they've been as of late. We've talked a lot about that. They have the drought south of the Yangtze River continuing. They've got very wet conditions over Australia. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But if you look here at North America, and then let's flip forward to December, January, February, it's pretty much the same around the world as we just saw. So if we go to North America, because at this point we'll be seeing the La Niña transition, we stay wetter in the northwest, We stay active in the midsection of the country, so near normal winter precipitation, but we will have to watch to see how the dryness that's currently forecast fades if the La Niña fades with it. So let's keep a close eye on that, all right? That's just new long-range data through winter here from the IRI Multi-Model Forecast Group. Quickly about South America and then Australia, and I'll wrap this up. We saw planting progress released on Friday. We're about 4% off a year ago in Mato Grosso. That 24.1% is the average. Remember, we had some really slow planting in here a few years ago. I was looking at some of the data, though, in Argentina. This is the latest NDVI imagery from Argentina, and they're well below their average. And that's largely been because of the drought that has been in Argentina, which we've been covering. As we kind of look out there at the precipitation forecast going forward, much of this next week is remaining very dry throughout Argentina. This is Buenos Aires. There might be some scattered rainfall that's over here near Cordoba, but along the Paraná River, quite dry. Even as we just let this play on out, you just don't see any major systems rolling through Argentina. So along that Paraná River, we continue to see very dry conditions. It's wetter in Paraná, which is the state here in Brazil, through Mato Grosso. But it's still some drier conditions near Mato Grosso do Sul and Goiás, which are tucked in the middle here. Now, what I want to show you is the new long-range update through December 2nd. This risk of remaining drier in pockets of southern Brazil, parts of Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina is still there. And this has been a really not good start to things down in Argentina, as we've been discussing. But I would expect this would mean faster planting progress through the next 40 days or so to finish up the planting of soybeans. And I expect this to be a decent start to the season if the La Niña fades and we have something else to talk about. Lastly, Australia. You've heard a lot about Australia lately in the news. Just want to make sure you're aware of where they do a lot of their agriculture. A lot of it's down near Perth in Western Australia. And if I kind of zoom in there, you can certainly see I'll just zoom in, fields everywhere, okay? That's Perth. If we slide over here toward and around Adelaide, this is a very agriculturally rich area. Just look at all the fields in this area. And then if we go to one last place, sorry if this is making a little dizzy, from Victoria through New South Wales and up into Queensland, this whole area in through here is very agriculturally productive. Between this would be the Darling River and the Murray River, these two major river systems. And some areas right in through here as of late, you can just zoom in and see all of the fields we've got in this area. Some of this area has been extremely wet, up to 100 to 200 millimeters of excess precipitation. So we're talking about 3.5 to 6 inches above normal in rainfall. And that follows a very, very wet spring in this area. And the new forecast data that's just been released, take a look at this. We're talking about adding into this same area here to here. Possibly, I'm just kind of looking at some of the new data. Look at that. Multiple waves of very wet weather. And from Queensland to New South Wales, Victoria, back to South Australia, we have pockets in here that could pick up 125 to 150 millimeters of rainfall. So another 4 to 5 inches of rain. So this is going to be very, very tough on spring planting and then, of course, the winter crops in this area. But I wanted to keep you aware of that. Okay, we covered a lot today. I appreciate your extra time. Hope you have a good start to your week, and I'll talk to you again for those who get my morning report. We'll talk in the morning. Thanks.